Welcome to the Inside Pitch Live. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this Facebook group where screenwriters, filmmakers, and creatives gather to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. As always, I am joined by my co-administrator, the meretricious Ramesh Santanam.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Ramesh.
Hey,
Another live interview.
exactly. This is a
All right.
fun.
Just a couple of quick announcements. Our last live interview was with Emmy winner, Golden Globe winner, Writers Guild winner, Producers Guild winner, Kira Snyder, formerly of The Handmaid's Tale, and now of the new HBO J.J. Abrams series. And her interview is now streaming on our YouTube channel. Yes, we have a YouTube channel where we corral all of these interviews. It's called The Inside Pitch. So you can see Kira's interview, the interview with Christopher McQuarrie, Jeb Stewart. In a week or so, today's interview with our special guest will be streaming there as well. So you can subscribe to the channel if you like. Keep in mind, we're not going to be marketing to you. We're not here to profit. We don't have books or consultations to sell. The Inside Pitch isn't about that. We're kind of like the PBS of screenwriting groups, although we don't have a pledge drive.
No, and we don't sell mugs.
We do not sell mugs. And we're just here to educate and inform, maybe entertain a little bit, and hopefully make your journeys through this very difficult craft and business a little bit easier. I wanted to announce the coming of our annual, really only our second annual Logline contest. Last year, we did what I thought was a pretty successful Logline contest. I think we had almost 400 entries. And the way it sort of works is you enter a logline, and then the best, I don't know, maybe the best 5 to 10 are put on to the group board, and then the members vote on which logline they think is best. And then the prize, if that's what you're going to call it, is a story conference with me. I will read the screenplay and then meet with you via Zoom or phone for a couple of hours talking about the script. However, writers are often bitching and moaning, well, Logline's not enough. I have to tell you more about my story. All right, fine. So this year we are going to add an additional live pitching component. So if you are one of the Logline finalists, you are going to be called upon right here in this little platform, and you're going to pitch live to the co-members, and they will vote on who's best, because I acknowledge that sometimes a logline isn't truly enough to reveal the magic that is held in those pages. So you will be given the opportunity to do that. So it's going to be sort of a two-part contest this year. And Ramesh and I haven't worked out that timeline yet, but when we do, we will announce it. And this will probably happen between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So since the prize is having your script read, you want to have a script. So maybe you can use this time wisely and finish up that screenplay. So let me just give a quick shout out to our third administrator, Steve Enlow. He's camera shy, but he works tirelessly within our group anonymously. He's incognito. And so without further ado, Mr. Ramesh is going to introduce today's guest.
Hi. Today we are thrilled to have lit manager Matt Dye. Matt attended the University of Texas at Austin and received a Bachelor of Science in Radio, TV, and Film with a focus in screenwriting. He joined Adam Kohlbrenner's Lit Entertainment Group as a literary manager in 2019. Before that, he worked at the Austin Film Festival since 2008, where he served as the director of script competitions and facilitated the evaluation of thousands and thousands of scripts, including many of yours, reaching a then record of 10,580 submissions in 2018. Through AFF, he has helped shepherd the careers of countless writers and is thrilled to continue championing writers as a lit manager. Matt, welcome to the Inside Pitch.
Hey guys, thanks for
Hey,
having
Matt.
me.
Thank you so much. So yeah, so this is sort of the height of the Austin season. Are you kind of missing it? Is this your first year that you're away from Austin, or is it your second year?
This is my second year, and obviously my first year not being at the physical event like everyone else.
Right.
I got to attend last year as a guest panelist, which was so much fun, and not having to worry about being on the ground, worrying about logistical stuff and putting out fires, even though I kind of felt I needed to last year. But yeah, it is. AFF is just around the corner, I think in 2 weeks. But yeah, it feels kind of weird to not really know what's going on behind the scenes.
Do you miss it?
Yes, for sure. And I miss the people, but you know, like I did that job for about 10 years or so. And, you know, like you always want to progress and challenge yourself. And where I'm at right now is very challenging, but in a very fun way. I've always loved working with writers, and this felt like the most natural progression. So, but it's been a fun, wild ride so far.
So can you talk a little bit about that transition and sort of, was there a light bulb that went off in your head? Were you approached by management companies? Did you approach them?
Oh, for sure. So sort of the Cliff Notes version of my backstory, I wanted to be a screenwriter. I went to school at UT, studied screenwriting, producing, and then got involved with the Austin Film Festival as an intern, and really saw that there was a real point of entry through competitions and festivals for writers, and couldn't have found a better place for that in my own backyard at the Austin Film Festival, like literally across the highway from UT. And it was, that's how I really cut my teeth really into the industry. That's how I got exposed to other management companies, producers, obviously thousands and thousands of writers, getting to know their process, their personal journeys, and then what it takes to sell the script and how to launch a writing career. And working with writers for so long and having to put their hands in hands to people in the industry and trying to figure out career strategies for them, I realized I was kind of already doing the job of a manager, not fully, but kind of getting a taste of it. And working with other managers, I got a sense of what they were looking for, what their job was like. And during my time at the Austin Film Festival, I started a friendship and relationship with Adam Kohlbrenner, who was a co-founder at Madhouse Entertainment, and had introduced him to a number of writers that he still reps and works with, and just always loved his ethos about hardcore development. And after the 25th anniversary of the Austin Film Festival, I felt like I really need to figure out what my next step is. And I went to him and a few others, of course, just for advice of like, what should I do? And Adam said, I think you should be a manager, and I think you should join me because I'm actually going to be launching a new initiative called Lit Entertainment Group at the top of 2019. And so it was one of those sort of unbelievable moments where the universe kind of conspired for you to set something up for you. And I took a meeting with Adam, and not knowing that it was going to turn into a job offer. So it's one of those unconventional stories of how me, somebody from Texas who ran a screenplay competition for a film festival, got plucked out of Texas and is working as a literary manager now in LA. Funny enough, though, during quarantine, I'm actually back here in Austin. So it kind of feels weird to be back here in my own backyard where I first started, but working for LA, and to be here also in the month of October and not work for the Austin Film Festival. So, but yeah, that's kind of my journey so far.
Yeah, there are, I have a lot of coworkers who have relocated out of town, far out of town during this. They're still working tirelessly 24/7, but yeah, so if you can do it in Austin, more power to you.
Yeah.
So, we have this, our Facebook group, the Inside Pitch, and Ramesh will be monitoring questions. So for our members, if you have questions for Matt, type them in the comments, and Ramesh will be monitoring those, and he will share the good ones with Matt. So work hard. So tell me sort of was there any sort of shock for you going from running the Austin screenwriting competition to being a manager? It
Oh,
seems
absolutely.
Like it's a big leap, right? It's a big leap.
It was definitely a big leap, and not to say that just like in any job in Hollywood, there's not one set path that you can follow, but mine was definitely a very unconventional one. Normally, a lot of managers work their way up from a desk, from being an assistant, intern, whatever, coordinator, and then like you learn the ropes by understanding the internal process. And I came into it fairly cold in terms of that. Like I didn't work as an assistant, but I knew how to work with writers, having worked with them for so long at the Austin Film Festival. So working with writers, obviously that was something that I was very familiar with, including the development process and all of that. But to throw in a wrench into everything too, I joined Lit Entertainment as a manager at the top of 2019, just as all the stuff was happening with the WGA and the ATA. And so literally I think it might have been the second or third week on the job for me, having to go to that meeting with a room full of other managers in Hollywood with the WGA to address the current state of affairs. And I already knew what was going on, but it was one thing to read about it and then actually be in the room where everyone's talking about it and not knowing exactly what everyone's talking about. And so that was very enlightening. And it's funny because after first becoming a manager, I haven't experienced a normal staffing season just because all the writers fired their agents last year. And then now we're in the middle of a pandemic. So it hasn't been, my path has not been very conventional so far, in a very unconventional year for a lot of people.
Maybe you've been bad luck. Maybe this is all your fault, Matt. I don't know. It's pretty coincidental.
Yeah, I know. Like I would like to think of myself as a powerful creator that I did all that, but yeah.
So you bring up the WGA ATA conflict, which as a manager, you have been out of the fray, so to speak. But is there any concern from the management front that because there are many managers who also produce, and a big chunk of the WGA dispute is that agencies are producing through their production affiliates. So is there any concern from managers that those same conflicts could be brought to your doorstep?
I mean, that's been brought up before. And we've talked about it internally as well as a team. Like we're not too worried about that right now. But the thing is, like, if 2020 has caused anything, no surprises. But yeah, I mean, I think if anything we've learned over the past year, not just 2020, but even last year, like this business is all about adapting. Like that's all you can really do, And so it is what it is. And we've just kind of accepted it, like not too worried.
Yeah, I think that there is an evolution to this business. It is constantly changing,
Mm-hmm.
and the agencies are now having to adapt. At least most of them are adapting, and eventually, my guess is that they all will come on board and start to adapt in some way or another. And it's an evolution. Ultimately, everybody figures out a way to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be different, perhaps. So, Ramesh, are you monitoring the questions from our group? Your microphone is off.
There we go. Sorry
That's all
about
right. It
that.
happens.
So yeah, let me go through.
By the way,
my
I
pad
love
here.
to catch Ramesh off guard. You know,
Exactly.
writing emails and doing all sorts of other things, and then I'm like, Ramesh.
So, someone asked, for self-published authors who are looking for managers, what numbers do they need to have as for stuff sold, or is it just the strength of the manuscript that you look for?
Well, I mean, for me, like if I'm having a discussion with somebody who's an author, the first question is like, are they wanting to do they want to adapt this? Are they wanting to transition into screenwriting? Are they also a screenwriter? Otherwise, we're now having the conversation of producing. We do that all the time. We have a producerial arm, of course, as well. And so that's when we would be discussing, like, for us, it's always going to be about the story, about the writing. But it doesn't matter if it's self-published or published. Obviously, if it's something that has a strong following, that has strength behind the IP, then obviously. But for us, like, it really just comes down to the strength of the story for the most part. It's not necessarily like numbers, although numbers can be attractive.
Okay, so then let's sort of stay on this topic, because I'm sure this is something that everybody is asking in one way or another, which is what is it that you look for? So what is it that you look for in material, and what is it that you look for in a writer?
So get this question a lot. Managers answer this question all the time, and you probably hear similar answer. We're genre agnostic. We're open to anything and everything, but at the end of the day, it's still based off of our own personal bias, whatever strikes a personal chord with us. I have the luxury to be able to have the full autonomy to find who I want to find, because at the end of the day, it is that interpersonal connection. It's like going on a date. You want to make sure this is somebody that you want to be with for the long haul, potentially. And so it's not just about how they are on the page, it's who they are as a person. Is this somebody who I want to work with? Is this somebody that I think other people will want to work with? But at the end of the day, it comes down, for me, POV. What do they have to say? Do they understand what makes them special and unique? Because as human beings, we tell the same stories over and over and over again, but you are your own person. So have you tapped into what makes you unique, how you see the world? And that's what, for me, myself, being Filipino and queer, I've grown up just sort of drawn to stories of underrepresented groups. And that's still very much what I'm personally drawn to. But it doesn't just spill into just, diversity. It's more into POVs, like, religion, gender, sexuality, new ways of thinking of stories that we're very familiar with. And so it's like, what do you have to bring to the table that's unique? Do you have a personal story that you can bring to the table as well? Often the story behind the storyteller is just as compelling, especially when you're pitching. So it's a number of factors, but for me, sometimes it can just be a gut feeling as well. I always like to meet with somebody. Of course, now we do it through Zoom, but I also want to read their past material, what they're working on currently, and their new ideas. I love idea generators. because you're only as good as your next 5, 6, 20 scripts. I may fall in love with your one feature script. Maybe we can figure out something to do with it, but I don't want to have it to be a one and done thing. I want to know that there's longevity in this relationship. So can probably keep talking longer about what we look for, but again, it really just comes down to that interpersonal connection, I think.
Should writers brand themselves? Because this comes up a lot too. Should they be like, they only write horror, they only write horror and thrillers, or they only write dramas or family things, or can writers have their fingers in everything? Which do you
I don't know if it's sort of a cop-out answer, because I would say yes and no. It really just depends, because if you are through and through a comedy writer and you know that your drama's not your thing, that's totally fine too. You just have to have a strong sense of self. I think if you want to look deeper, again, it comes down to POV. What types of stories are you drawn to? Are they about underrepresented groups? Do you like is sports your thing? Redemptive tales. You just have to know what you bring to the table, and what your voice is. And so, like I have a client who's working in the comedy action space, but wants to do, his grounded sci-fi arrival. I'm like, well, how can we get there? And we're about to work on an announcement fairly soon for a script that we sold of his, and so I think the strategy is like, whenever you get that trade announcement for a script you sold, then that's how you'll end up getting pigeonholed as like, okay, now you're going to be incoming business in that genre space. And so now that's how we're going to be marketing you. That's jobs we're going to be looking for you in that sort of action comedy space. But how can we figure out those half steps to get you into writing those sci-fi projects? So maybe we do an action sci-fi comedy. So we do, again, a half step. And then we have you play around that space and have it be a little bit of a darker comedy. And then eventually we can kind of get there. There's strategies around it, but it's really just to understand what is your voice and what's the genre that makes the most sense. So like I that's why I feel like it seems rather restrictive to just say that I'm only this and I'm only that. But it's also one thing to say I can do everything, because most people won't believe that. And honestly, you probably can't. And so there's only a few things that you just have to know what your strengths are and what you bring to the table. And I think it's just also a conversation that you would have with your rep in terms of like how you'd be pitching yourself as a storyteller.
So if I'm a writer and I have written my first script and I get it to you and you think the writing is good, maybe it's not a script that you can sell. There isn't really a market for it. But I haven't written anything else. Where would I stand with you?
Well, I would say thanks, but come back again when you have more. But I would also I would ask too, like, the work would have to be really undeniable for me to, and I would have to see the potential that they can do more. So if it's only one script that they've written, I would pause on that, just because I want to know that this is not just sort of, again, like a one and done thing. Like this is the very first feature that they've ever written. If it's something that's really undeniable and that we think we can tell, and that this voice is so strong that then we can work together on it, because my client list is pretty small, so I have to also look at how much hand holding do I really want to invest in this. My list is under 20 right now, and it's because I'm very hands-on and I'm very picky too about who I want to work with. And so, a lot of my clients are newer writers. A few of them are fairly developmental. And so that means every week I'm reading everything that they're working on, giving them notes every week, and while also figuring out strategies for them and submitting them and putting them up for generals and all of that. And so those are all the things that I'm thinking of when I take on a new writer who may only have one or two scripts. Like, is this going to be work? How much work am I willing to invest in this? How much work are they willing to put into it? not fully relying just on me. Are they an idea generator who I don't have to feed them ideas, that they can come up with them on their own? So yeah, I would want to have that conversation of, what do you have next? What are you working on? How many scripts have you already written? But again, it's case by case. So it just comes down to the individual.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a manager and an agent? And if I'm a new writer, where should I try to go first?
Well, so with managers, I mean, I think we kind of touched on that before. It's just like agents, the main difference is agents can't produce, managers can, at least for now. And managers are very hands-on. And so because I didn't really get to work with any agents last year, and as they all came back to working with writers this year, I've added agents to the team for my clients. And so normally it's a conversation that we have with the client. I think it's time to bring on an agent, because agents are incredibly helpful with staffing and helping find opportunities and just helping package. They're essentially, they help close, and so for us, for managers, we do a lot of the legwork creatively. We go through several drafts, and some agents are hands-on as well, but not as much, nowhere near as much as managers. And so we develop. I check in with the agent, say, this is what we're working on. This is something that you think might be something? Do you know anybody who's looking for something like this? And so, but yeah, I mean, like, going back to the main difference is agents don't produce. They're not very hands-on in terms of the creative part of it, that process, but hands-on in terms of figuring out the strategies, in terms of staffing, packaging, and all that.
So is it more common for a manager to introduce a writer to an agent, or do agents often introduce their clients to managers?
I think it goes both ways, but primarily because we have a lot of relationships with all the different agencies, many agents. So it's usually us who does that, because as a manager, we're guiding their career. And so depending on if they already, like, I have clients who already had an agent first. Sometimes you get an agent first depending on relationship and all of that. But normally, from what I've seen, is that you usually get a manager first, then you add an agent, or you add obviously an attorney whenever something happens, and you need, that's usually the team. But yeah, it's usually, I would say, I usually try to reach out first and have that conversation with the client to see if this is an agency that they want to work with.
I just lost my question. And it was a good one too. And it's gone forever.
Of course.
So Ramesh, why don't you try to pick up the slack
Okay.
while this old man tries to remember the question we just lost?
Denise Bissinger asks, what if a client has a meeting with a production company and they like your client's style, but they want them to write what the producer wants, usually on spec? Would you tell the client to move on?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question again?
That's a very specific question.
Yes.
Yeah.
If a client has a meeting with a production company and they like what your client has written, but they want the client to write what the story the producer has, but they want it written on spec, would you then ask the client to say, nah, and move on?
Oh, first, though, like, pretty much on any meeting that a client has, general, whatever, especially pitching, like, I'm picking up the phone, or at least getting in touch with that producer and just having a conversation. How did it go? Like, just be honest with me and let me know, like, is this something that you want to work on? What are your notes? Ultimately, it's my job to protect the writer, protect them on many different fronts, and especially creatively, what they intended to do. With almost all my clients, working on developing an idea with them from the ground up, and I know why they wrote the story, what their intentions are. And so when I have that conversation with the producer, that this is a great script, but I'd rather have it be this way. If it feels like it's fairly in line with what we want to do, then I would go back to the client and say like, hey, is this something that you want to do, or do we just move on? Often we'll move on and try and find the right creative partner that gets the vision from the client. So yeah, I mean, it's a conversation that I would first have with the producer and then the client, and then just make a decision from there.
So do you represent writers for both features and TV?
Yes.
And so can we talk a little bit about pilots? Because I meet a lot of new writers who write pilots, and their goal, of course, is to sell that pilot and be a showrunner, despite that they don't have any experience ever writing in TV. So can you sort of talk about how you would handle a writer who perhaps does have a good pilot? How do you market that? What does that look like? Again, especially for a writer who's never worked in TV before, maybe has never worked professionally at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, I mean, this happens often, and it's something that we also try to do internally as well, you know, because we have many clients at all different levels. And so if we find that internally, we kind of do our own sort of internal packaging, where if we have a client fairly new, a new baby writer, and they have a pilot that we feel is undeniable that people are going to really respond to, but because this is a fairly new voice, that people are a little wary of investing time and money into somebody so new, that we would look internally with our upper level, maybe even mid-level clients, to see, would you want to supervise in some kind of way? Would you show run this and have our other client be the creator of the show? So we would try and do that internally. We would also even do that externally as well if we don't have anybody on our own team, but that's like one strategy. But in terms of our own development process, like say I have a fairly new writer, and we're developing a pilot together. It's always going to be our goal to have them be the creator of this, that we are going to sell it. Like for us, it's not about, let's just write a noisy sample and get it out there just for staffing. Like, why not shoot for the moon? Like, we're going to try and sell this. And that's part of our strategy, that we're going to go take it out, try and sell this, figure out ways to package it, add talent to it, figure out ways to sell it, bring on EP, somebody to supervise, show run, whatever, and then take it out. And then if nobody raises their hands or wants to buy it, worst case scenario is that, we got our client out there, got them read, hopefully created a bunch of fans for them that could lead into staffing opportunities, or maybe, and that we've now paved the path for them, that when we develop the next pilot and we've had these fans that we can go back to, we can send them their next thing because we've started that process. And so, but yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how we approach it with newer writers, with pilots, and trying to sell it and get it out there.
So generally speaking, and I'm not asking what your success record is, but let's say generally speaking, if you had 10 baby writers with pilots and a manager went about that strategy, how out of those 10 pilots, how many would actually succeed?
This sounds like a pop quiz math question. I feel like I need to bring out my calculator. I mean, like, statistically, I don't know if I have that answer. It's like, we all know how hard it is to get stuff out there, and especially right now, people are buying. So it is tough to figure that part out. In terms of pilots, I think with features, we've been seeing a lot of sales on those. TV is a little tricky because nobody really knows officially what production is going to look like again for that, but people are buying feature specs. Like, as a company, we've sold quite a bit already, and we actually sold a pilot pretty recently as well, I think this week. Yeah, statistically, I feel like with TV, just to answer that question, if I can, is that I feel like in the TV space, it's harder, especially right now, compared to features.
Would you rather have a client who's working in TV because there seems to be more opportunity for writers? Is that a better way for writers to go? Should writers be writing pilots and maybe spec samples in TV rather than features?
I think again, I think it's case by case. Like, I think if you are, I would advise, just especially for my own clients, that like they should be writing both features and pilots, just because it opens up many opportunities for them. You double your chances. But like, I'm not going to force a client who's only worked in the TV space and is afraid to write a feature or just doesn't have that experience yet. I'm not like, that's just a conversation that I would have with them one way or another. But if you're in the feature space and you want to sell spec, you can just do that anywhere. And especially right now, it doesn't even matter. You don't technically have to be in LA right now anyway. But with in the feature space, I think that it's I don't want to say it's easier. It feels weird to just even use that word in terms of selling material. But in the feature space, like there will always be a hunger for that. TV is, like I said, it's just a little trickier right now. But I think you just, again, like, I think you open your chances if you have both.
Thank you. Mr. Ramesh?
Let's see. You read tons of scripts through AFF and now, and Eddie McFadden asked, and you've obviously come across some really good, if not great writers. Why do some good or great writers why don't they break through?
I've always wondered that too, especially, working at the Austin Film Festival and falling in love with so many great scripts and writers, and then wondering why. And, it's really tough, because it's not just about what's on the page. Like I said, it's like, what's the story behind the storyteller? Are you a decent human being? There's a lot of other factors that come into play. And also, I think that Hollywood, I think, just in general, doesn't necessarily know what it wants. They say producers, execs, they say what they want, what they think they know what they want, but you have to almost incept their creative minds that this is something that you need to read. This is something that you need to buy and get made. And that's the whole other discussion here about being able to talk about your story and why you to tell this story. Like, you really have to just understand what you bring to the table. And I guess understanding the market as well. And the market is always in flux. If you look at the trades and you try to follow the trades, you're already too late anyway, at that point. And so what I've learned the best, and what I've seen from writers who've gone through the festival or just the competition scene, it's the ones who are the generators. Like, we have a number of upper level clients who I think only maybe in the past year or two have received a lot of traction. And I think it was, it's sort of like an arbitrary thing that a lot of managers say. It's like, it takes 3 to 5 years, for a new writer. Like, if you really are generating and putting yourself out there, and you have a good rep or good reps who are putting you out there, 3 to 5 years. And have definitely seen that with a lot of our existing clients right now, who started off as lower level writers and worked their way up to being an upper level writer. It takes time. And the reason why a lot of the great writers who I fall in love with is that they may be just focusing on that one script. Like, if you win AFF and that's the nickel or any other reputable competition or fellowship program, and you're just holding on to that one thing, that's only going to take you so far. You're going to need more than that. What you need is resiliency, and that can be a tough thing for some writers. So I think that's probably sort of my answer to that question.
Yeah, it's really a lot of work, and I think that unfortunately, some people believe that they've written a script, whether it's good or bad, but they've written a script, and then it's almost their God-given right that they should now be allowed to have their movie made. And it doesn't quite work that way.
No.
No. All right. So one of our members is asking, what's the best way to approach a manager?
Like a human being. It is funny because like not being at the physical event at the Austin Film Festival, but like in previous years, I would see how writers would approach managers. They would all sort of like line up to talk to a manager, happened to be at the Driscoll bar, and immediately go into the pitch. Like, okay, so you just see me as somebody who could do something for you. Like this is a creative partnership. It is a partnership nonetheless. Like, let's treat each other like human beings here. So that would be the first thing. But since we're not doing in-person stuff, then it's all virtual. So, you know, in terms of approaching reps, it's through queries, and queries can be very tough, and each manager has their own opinion of queries. It's Adam Kohlbrenner loves queries, and I get queried all the time, especially from AFF writers, and especially after doing panels like this. And so the best way to approach me is why you think that this is going to be a good relationship. Like I've received queries where it definitely looks like a form email. They may have done it through a mail merge, or they just email me their log line and maybe a little bit about themselves, and then that's it. There's only so much you can get from a log line, just like you said earlier, Chris. And so like, what is it about me? Like, not that you have to inflate my ego by any means, but like, why do you think, why me? Why do you think that I'm additive to you in your writing career? And how are you additive to me as well? Like, this is going to be a partnership moving forward. And why now? You know, so like if you won a competition, have a high placement, you know, I think that's something to lead off with for sure. You know, like the lower the placement though, the less attractive that is. So I wouldn't necessarily lead off if, say, you were a quarterfinalist in a smaller competition. But if you won a competition or were a finalist, well, then that's something that I'd be interested in. And also personal relationships that you may have too. It also helps if you have somebody who might be connected to me or my company that can vouch for you, either that you CC them when you query me, or that you have them email me on your behalf, because then, you know, I'm going to respond too, of course. And so, but yeah, I would say that we can probably talk longer on the proper etiquette for queries, but I'd probably say like that's just sort of like the quick and dirty of it.
How important are log lines, generally speaking? If I sent you a query letter with all those things that you said, but without a log line, would you still consider it?
Oh, I mean, it really just depends on like, you know, like we work with many different creators who, funny enough, who may not have even written a screenplay before. Like it's very, very, very few. But storytelling goes across all different mediums, and as long as somebody is willing to make that transition, then we can work with that. You know, we work with sculpturists and comic book artists, people who've worked in the video game space before, and so they may not have necessarily log lines to put out there, but like, who are they as a storyteller? Again, it comes back to what I said about POV. How do they see the world, and what kind of stories do they want to tell, and have they at least thought about what those stories are? But I mean, like, it's like I would highly advise to not send a query without a log line, because I want to know what you're working on, what your current projects are, or at least what your you know, upcoming new ideas are. So yeah, absolutely include a log line. And also, like, comps are always very helpful, you know, just to get some context of you know, what this story could be, and using wise comps. I think there are a lot of queries that I've received and seen where they use comps that are very like filmmaker driven, writer directors. And so then I'm going to ask them, do you want to be a director? Because, you know, if you're using like a Terrence Malick film as a comp, like, well, I don't really necessarily know if I could work with that. You know what I mean, in terms of what's actually on the page. So like, you want to think wisely about what the market is, like what comp, like I've seen comps that were not very strong, or films that I've never heard of before either, and not just because it's either from a different era or more of like an underground sort of film. But yeah, I might have digressed a little bit from your question, but yes.
No. And can you just be specific for those maybe who are not up on the jargon, exactly what you mean when you say a comp?
Oh, sure. Like what is a comparable project to this? And it's sort of that sort of old school Hollywood way of pitching that it's this meets that. The one that I always like to just because I think would be fun to see if there would be a version of this, is like Bridesmaids meets Jaws. Like what would that movie look like? Because it creates a clear picture. Like I've been in rooms with clients who are pitching where when they give a comp, they give like just a one sentence log line, and then the comp, and then the producers just flip. They lose their shit. Like, oh, that's awesome, I want to read that. Like, and then I've seen it happen with other writers where they go into their sort of long pitch of it all, and you just kind of see that everybody in the room like roll their eyes. It's like it's being quick and efficient, and comps are the best way to communicate that, because people already have the preconceived notions of what it is. So you really want to think wisely about, what makes yours familiar but still unique.
Yeah, I sometimes hear people saying, oh, nobody uses comps anymore. At my agency where I work, we use them all the time, because it really is an excellent way to communicate sort of the vision or the tone. But I completely agree with you that sometimes writers are sort of off base, that they use bad films, unsuccessful films that nobody's heard of, or the hybrid itself is sort of weird. It's like Caligula meets The Sound of Music, and you're like kind of scratching your head on that one. So there is a little bit of finesse that has to be used, I think, when you're considering that. But I completely agree. I think that they're really wise, a very smart marketing tool. Can we talk a little bit about contests? Because you mentioned that, if you're the quarterfinalist in the, Acme screenwriting contest, maybe that isn't something worth bragging about. Can you be specific in regards to perhaps which contests are worthy of bragging rights, and maybe where in the hierarchy, if you fall quarterfinalist, semifinalist? So if you're a quarterfinalist in the nickel, does that matter more than if you're a quarterfinalist in the Scriptapalooza, for example?
Right. Yeah. Well, the nickel is what it is. Like it is sort of the gold standards of competitions, even though technically it's a fellowship program. And then of course I'm always going to sing the praises of the Austin Film Festival. So don't necessarily need to go further with that one. But there's Screencraft is great. Love the guys who run that. Tracking Board is also great too. And all the different fellowship programs, the network fellowship programs, all the different labs, those are all very those programs are very selective. So I talk about the Disney program, the NBC Writers on the Verge, those are the Warner Brothers program. Those are all things that are highly competitive, all very attractive. So if you do well in you are accepted into those programs, then it definitely piques my interest a lot more. But with competitions, just because again, each year, like AFF now gets now 12, 13,000 submissions like that. And so if you advance even to the second round, that does mean something, but on its own, it's not going to be the thing that's going to have me want to read that script. So you're going to have to be able to supplement it with something else. Have you done well in other competitions as well? And so including a list is fine, you know, but like if you include a list that goes back the last 5-6 years for 1 or 2 scripts, then I'm going to wonder, how come nothing has happened for that script? You may be doing well in the competition scene, but I'm not exactly sure how you would do in the actual Hollywood market, if that makes any sense, because that's the real competition right there. And so screenplay competitions only go so far, but the higher the placement, obviously, the better. And I always reference this one site that maybe a lot of people on here might know, but moviebytes.com, moviebytes with a Y, sort of has an old school layout, but they have a lot of rankings for all the major competitions out there. And I think it's a good guide for people who don't necessarily know which ones to submit to. But, you know, the quick and dirty of it is just looking at their success stories and what have they done for their writers who've done well.
Thank you.
Okay.
One of our writers wants to, I'm sorry, Ramesh, one of our writers wants to ask about age. This comes up a lot. Okay, there you go. Because, you know, the old boys want to know. So you spoke about diverse voices earlier. How do you feel age falls into that category?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, age is just a number, you know, like, and when people read a script, like, they're reading the material. Eventually, they're going to meet the writer, but they're reading the material first. Like, I actually rep at least 2 writers who are, I believe, over in their late 40s or over 50. And when we take out the material, age never comes up. You know, actually, I don't even know certain ages of some of my clients. It's just one of those things that you don't necessarily ask, you know, and unless it's, you know, like say, what we're seeing more and more of, like say for open writing assignments or just projects, producers are looking for particular writers, that they are wanting writers who are the perfect people, human beings, to tell that particular story. So if it's say it's a story about somebody who is handicapped or disabled, and or somebody who is who identifies as trans, they're going to want somebody to tell that story, or somebody of a certain age, because that's the story, what the story is about. Then you have something to work with. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily sweat that too much. You may encounter reps or just other people who are all about, like, I love working with young writers. And so the real question to ask is, like, what do they mean by young? Young in terms of career as a writer, or young in terms of age? You know, because you know, you can write stories that of any age, even if you're not of that particular age group. So yeah, it really just depends too. And there are a lot of great programs out there. There's like the Writers Lab, the one that's funded by Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman for women over 40. Love that program as well. Met with a lot of writers there. And so there are outlets for sure for stuff like that.
Yeah, some of our members have come out of that group. Heidi Stangeland wants to know, how do you feel about titles? Does a good title make a difference?
I think so. Yes, but it's not going to be the thing that it's an attention grabber for sure. Like if it's put in a query in the subject line, and it's like a really funny, weird title, I'm out of my own curiosity, I'm going to look at that. Or, you know, if you're submitting to a competition, or I'm perusing a list of the top writers from a competition, you know, I may be attracted to a particular title. Like even going back to my days at ASF, when I would take a bunch of scripts home with me, I would look in my pile, like, what am I going to read tonight? Had a long day. I'm going to go through and find that one script. And I'm referencing a particular moment where I'm trying to read I need to read something. And it's late and I'm tired. I'm going through, I'm like, oh, I'm going to read that script because it's called I Talked to James Bond. And that's an actual script that won AFF.
Right.
And I just love the title. It's like, that title's not going to make it through if it does get made. And I read it, fell in love with it. And that doesn't always happen. But, you know, it is something to think about, because when people look at their pile, like say, you know, as a manager, you know, we're also judging for competitions all the time. Reps do that. And sometimes we're given sort of a mixed bag of material, or we don't necessarily get to pick what we're judging. We're going to figure out what we're going to read first that night. And so I think it's wise to come up with a really smart title.
Yeah, you know, I can think of a few times where the title was the best part of the read.
And that's where the read ended.
Yeah, it's all downhill from there. So I'm glad that the James Bond script worked. So Catherine Panzella has a question, and I hear a lot of writers wanting to do this kind of thing. So I'm going to read this. She says, I'm writing a World War II script. It's a Pearl Harbor type into a book, because she was told by 8 producers that IP is needed first for a big budget film. So how do you feel about the wisdom in that?
I mean, it's a strategy that's worked, but by no means it's something that is like foolproof, that like, oh, we always have to do that. But like, there's always different strategies. Like, we have a client who did exactly that. It's actually a writer who came from AFF. The script was a finalist a few years ago, made it onto the blacklist, got a lot of traction out of it, never got made. And so she ended up reworking it, writing it as a manuscript, and then now it's out of the book. And so that's one strategy for sure. So it's just really, it's trying to figure out what the long game is, because we want to get that film made. And so that's one way for that to ensure that, to create more awareness for it as IP. So it's not a bad thing, but it's like a real conversation that you'd have to have with your whole team to see if it's something that you really want to invest the time to do, because you already wrote the script, and having to adapt it into a book, that's going to be over a year probably of trying to figure out how to write that, and then coming up with strategies for it. So it's really more like, does this make sense, or do we just move on and try and find another project?
Yeah, because then often you're sort of stuck with 2 projects that you can't move. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so definitely a lot of thought needs to go into that. And sometimes I think that there are producers who, they don't know how to say no. So they're like, oh, well, it would probably be wiser for you to write a novel first. This way you're out of their hair for a year and a half.
Yeah, I know.
And you'll probably never write the novel.
Yeah, you'd have to have a really good bullshit meter, but also just to know how to take the real note behind the note.
Yes.
Mr. Ramesh?
Since you've read a ton of scripts, what mistakes, issues do you see in many or most new writers' work?
Oh, boy.
How much time do you have now?
I'm going to sit back for this one.
Yeah.
Matt, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, in terms of material, it's just like, the first thing that we'll look at is, how long is this script? If it's like a feature, is it a bloated 130 plus epic script? You know, that's one thing. I mean, we look at everything. We look at the cover page. Did they leave, the last draft number of this? It was, last revision was from 2018. So like, oh, so you're sending me something that's old? That's not, like, what have you been doing since then? So like, we really look and scrutinize and overanalyze literally like everything. Mistakes, gosh, it's really bloated scene descriptions. It's all of those like sort of rules of screenwriting that you're not supposed to do, but writers just do anyway. But I don't know. It's like you're only given, if it's a query, you really need to knock it out of the park really on the first page. Like I've learned that just because, like, for one, where I came from at the Austin Film Festival, screenplay competitions, writers submit an entry fee. So the expectation is that they're going to have their script read in their entirety, at least in the first read. And so for us on the management side, from a query, we're not obligated to do that. We're trying to find our next partners to work with, those clients. And so it is, you want to respect the time of who you're sharing your work with. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake, is that, you're not front loading in the best way possible in your material. Even if it's a slow burns need to feel intriguing. You need to feel invested from the very beginning. So any mistakes that you have up front will be scrutinized, because that's something, because we read so much, literally every day, especially over the weekends, that, like we pay attention to these things. Like we internally at Lit, we even have a bingo card, an actual bingo card of lots of mistakes from writers, everything from writing on tight, to misspelling lightning as lightening,
Yes.
soldier as so lighter. You'll be surprised, or maybe not, that those are probably the two words that are constantly misspelled in scripts. But it's not going to be the thing that makes or break it.
And loose and lose. I see that all the time, even from A-list screenwriters. And I see it more than once in the same script.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when I worked at ICM, we had a wall of shame. And so when there were things that were particularly egregious in a screenplay, someone would make a Xerox copy of that page and put it up on the wall of shame. Maybe that's not the nicest thing to share, but there's a reality that there is an expectation for your scripts to be as professional as possible. People are paying attention. So before we end this, and we're not ending quite yet, I'm not letting you leave just quite yet, Matt, but I am going to give Matt 3 log lines, just 3, to provide some feedback on, just at the end. So if anybody has a log line that they want to share with
we already
Matt,
have one.
Okay. And he's going to be honest. This isn't about boxing gloves. This is like mixed martial arts or something. He's here to kick your ass. So, so if you want to share one, again, we're only going to throw 3 at him, but Ramesh will cherry pick, I guess, whatever in the comments. So Matt, what are your thoughts on writers' personal websites? So should a writer have a personal website? Is that something that you would actually click on and explore? And if yes, what should it include?
I don't have any strong opinions on it, but I know some clients of mine may have personal websites, but I get queried a lot, obviously, and in either in their signature, or they actually put in the body of their email, they put their website on there. And the thing about that is, a lot of writers will put their scripts up on there for anybody to download. I don't think that's necessarily a wise thing to do, to put out all your material on there, because for one, it's, as a rep, I want to be able to at least not guide, not necessarily fully control, but you know what I mean, be able to guide and navigate where the material goes to. So that's probably one thing to not necessarily do. But if you're putting out projects that you're working on, maybe a little bit more about your bio, I think that's all good and fine, because it gives people something easy to reference. But I don't know if you necessarily need that. Like for me, at least, what it comes down to, again, it comes down to the material and who they are as a person. And you need to be able to communicate that effectively in the body of the email more than anything. But personal websites, yeah, I guess, I mean, it's fine. If, like, especially if, say that you are a writer director and you want to include, your directing reel, sure. That's incredibly handy to have. But I think as a writer, that's a little tricky. I think it's, maybe putting your accolades on there, but I do have one client where multiple producers actually reached out because they put up, their accolades and log lines for the material, and then they reached out, so it could work. But again, like, I don't think it's necessarily fully needed.
How about these various services like the blacklist? Not the annual list, but the paid service. Is that something that you utilize? Do you know other managers who use it? Is it a good tool for a writer? And when should a writer know how to use it? And because I've been on there and I see writers that are sort of sharing their scripts that scored a 2 or a 3. Is that wise to do?
Well, I mean, no matter what service, if it's a blacklist, Coverfly or anything else, like, just putting your script up there, like, so that's probably one of the first mistakes. Is like, I've written a screenplay, maybe it did well as a quarterfinalist or a second rounder in a competition, I'm gonna put it up there. Not to say that it's not good if it only made it to the quarterfinals or second rounder, but like, the first thing you have to do is just be honest with yourself. Did you take the time to really develop this, get enough feedback on it? If you don't have a manager or a rep, like, if you're part of a writer's group, did you share it with your writer's group? Did you do a script reading of it? There's so many different ways, in terms of how you can make sure that you've developed your work enough before you actually invest the time and money to have on there. Like, when you put it up on the blacklist, you have to, it's like a subscription service. And so you don't want to put something that's half baked up there, because you're going to be wasting your money. I think that you just have to make sure that you developed it enough and got enough opinions from other people, because writers use the blacklist a lot, and so you're competing with a lot of other scripts that are up on there as well. But like, a lot of writers will, when they query me, they'll tout that they've gotten consistently like 8 on there, which it is tough to get an 8 on there. And so whenever I see something like that, like, that might actually pique my interest a little bit. But like you said, if it's a 2 or a 3, like, why would you even bring that up? But yeah, the bottom line is, no matter what service, just make sure you've done your due diligence with your own work, have it vetted before. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your money.
Ramesh, you've been busy typing away there. You sound like Fred Astaire.
Oh crap! I meant to mute it.
I'm waiting for Ginger Rogers to come in.
Oh no!
But you're working hard. That's
Yeah, blood, sweat, and tears. So can you talk a little bit about, since, what were you, 10 years at AFF, 10, 12 years at AFF?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about AFF, and also sort of the conference that came with it, and sort of the importance of networking and stuff like that, using it, and how events like that, how a conference like that can be beneficial to screenwriters?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, obviously it's different this year, and
Right.
Hopefully we'll be able to be back in person. I mean, that was the magic of AFF, is that, like, yes, you could do well and place well in the competition, but it was really the magic that happened with the fellow writers that were there together. Like, I think a lot of writers come to the conference thinking, I'm going to find my dream rep, producer, my screenwriting hero, and they're going to make all my dreams come true. But what comes up pretty consistently from writers who attend AFF is that camaraderie that they develop with their fellow writers, either just writers who have also done well in the competition, or just somebody who just happened to be sitting next to them at the Driscoll bar or in the middle of a panel and struck up like a very organic conversation. And so, and you can find that magic in a lot of other places too, fellowship programs, labs, other events like, the Writers Guild Foundation did a lot of events, similar events as well. But since we're not doing physical events, a lot of places have resorted to doing virtual stuff, obviously, and virtual meet and greets, virtual happy hours, and so like AFF has shifted to doing that, and I believe they have plans in the works to try and figure out how to supplement that in the absence of that in being there at the Driscoll bar. I think they're working on sort of like a virtual Driscoll bar. I'm curious to know what that's going to be like. But yeah, I mean, like, bottom line is, I think with festivals, competitions, and all of that, like, you can't forget your fellow writers. Like, those are the people you need to find your tribe. You could turn into a future writing partner, collaborator. Writers groups are incredibly helpful. I have a lot of clients who are still part of writers groups, even the ones who are fairly established right now, because it's their tribe. And when one rises, they want to lift everyone else up. They want to introduce them to other some of their contexts as well. So I think probably my best advice is, again, just don't forget about your other writers. Don't look at them as competition, even though they technically are, at least in the actual competition. But that's where I think the real networking really happens.
Are you on Twitter or Instagram, and how should writers be using social media to try and network?
So I do have social media. I am not active on there for a lot of reasons. For me personally, it's a lot of noise, but I have the accounts because I do like reading Twitter threads, posts, just seeing what other opinions are out there. But also for myself professionally, like I'm looking up what other writers who I should be looking for, but also, like, because we also have a producerial arm as well. I'm also putting my producer hat on to try and find ideas, and we've found stuff. We've signed writers off of Twitter. We've found producing projects directly off of Instagram. So in terms of putting yourself out there, I mean, like, you want to put yourself out there, but you don't want to necessarily fully put your stuff out there, if that makes any sense. Like, going on rants about politics or what's going on in the world, like, there is a decorum of how you want to present yourself, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be looking at, this is somebody who I'm going to rep. I want to make sure that they're also representing themselves well publicly. Like, I don't want to have to work with a client that I'm going to have to answer to for something that they said. And so, yes, to a certain extent, like, not always, but, like, whenever I'm interested in a writer, I like to just do my own research and see what's online about them, if they've written any articles, op-ed pieces, do they have an active social media, and yeah, I mean, I think that we have one client who has probably like close to 100,000 followers on Twitter, and so, like, that is attractive to any rep or producer, that there's somebody who has such a large following, and it's because she has such a strong, distinctive voice that people want to listen to. And then we can turn that into something that we can market and sell, develop.
So the $1,000,000 question, and I'll try to softball it. Is your management company open to queries? You see, I could have asked, are you open to queries? And then everybody would just be bombarding you. So, I'm trying to, and this,
yeah.
and okay, yes, all right. I mean, this is not a commercial for that, but also, if well, maybe I should ask you first. Do you actually respond to all queries, or is no response a response?
Yes. To all of that. Yeah, because it's like we're not obligated to respond, you know, and you know, like I myself get a handful of queries a day. Some days are a ton, you know, so it's also when you do it. Like, I don't want to be queried over the weekend. I'm already reading a lot over the weekend, but if you happen to catch me early in the morning on a Monday, Tuesdays are great because I'm catching up on emails on Mondays. So not to say that I'm now, because I said that, I'm fully expecting to get queried on Tuesdays. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of it really just depends on the management company, the manager. But for us, like we do love queries. I mentioned Adam Colbrenner loves them too. Like, and but we don't respond to all of them. And there, we, as a company as a whole, you know, we have our own sort of info, you know, lit entertainment email account where queries will go to. But you know, like people are looking at them. And so if you're going to query, make sure you've taken the time to do it. But, you know, for us, yes, I respond to the ones that, just because of where I was at the Austin Film Festival, I don't remember every single writer who I've met with in passing, or I may remember parts of their script, maybe their script title, maybe their name. And then they'll reference that, like, Matt, we met in 2016 after that one panel with Shane Black, and we were in the elevator together, and like, oh, that was so specific that was probably true. Okay, I guess I'll respond. Because that means we had a personal connection, and that means that this is somebody who I don't think is crazy, hopefully. So I think it's, you know, contextualizing it. Again, it's like speaking to me like I'm a human being. Then I'm not just somebody that, like, blah, here's my script, do something with it. You know, like, I think if you're able to tug on something personal, like on my own personal heartstrings, and if you tie it into Austin Film Festival, like, okay, I'll see if there's something here.
You're a pushover when it comes to Austin.
I am.
So, all right. So let's say that I send you a query and you don't respond, and let's say 2 months go by. Should I send you another query, the same query, let's say, and sort of as an addendum to that question, let's say that you respond and you ask for my script, and I send you my script, but I don't hear from you. What is the sort of follow-up protocol for a writer with you?
Sure. Well, there's at least two things to bring up. So one, would highly advise not to just email any rep, anybody, and attach their script, because every company has their own submission agreement form just to protect ourselves as a company. And so if you attach a script and send it directly, unsolicited, and we respond, that's us acknowledging receipt of receiving it. And so that puts us in a tricky situation. So we never respond, just so that the writers on here know to not do that. So, and then the other thing is, say that you query me and I don't respond, and you want to follow up. When you follow up, you know, like, give it some time, just because, you know, like we're constantly, all reps are inundated by queries, but just also stuff from clients and producing stuff and many different things, for various reasons. And so following up, follow up at least once. It wouldn't hurt, but think about it wisely, because that may be your only shot to follow up. And so, do you have something else to bring to the table? Because if I didn't respond, or if another rep didn't respond, give them a reason to respond. If it didn't work the first time, I mean, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and again. So why would you send the same query? Like, think of another reason why. This script also won this competition. This script got this producer attached. the script got to a junior agent who loved it and is out to so-and-so with it. Like, those are the things that would be appealing, because then I can also do my own due diligence and look into that too, to see if there's something there. So I would say, like, if you're going to follow up, if you can, make sure you have a reason to give them even more of a reason to respond.
And if you have solicited the script and the writer hasn't heard back from you, is there a particular length of time that they should wait? I mean, I have a turnaround sometimes of like 4 months. So, when is it appropriate for a writer to say, hey, have you read my script yet?
Oh, sure. Like, I wouldn't do that after a week. Maybe a month. I don't know. I think everyone's different in terms of, like, I always try to make sure I clear out all the scripts I'm supposed to read for the week. But, I have my clients and my own producing projects that come first, and queries are lower in that stack unless there's something that feels really undeniable, or came highly recommended by somebody that I know, somebody that we trust. And so if it's just like for me, because I peruse different lists, from competitions, fellowships, labs, programs, I'm the one who's soliciting the material and seeing if they would be able to share it, sending the form, all of that stuff. And then because I'm the one who is reaching out, I try to get back as soon as I can, within a week, within 2 weeks. That's usually what I try to aim for. But if you don't hear from somebody after a while, that obviously is that's kind of your answer. If it's just sitting there, if well, for one, that may not even be the right partner if someone's not going to get back to you for a long time, because that just means that they just weren't that interested to begin with. But yeah, I think it can be tricky in terms of following up.
But they should follow up.
I think so, because if it was solicited by somebody else, because they were initially interested, so it's worth the follow up. So absolutely, yeah.
All right.
But give it time. I would say like at least a month.
A month. All right. Yes, Ramesh, go ahead.
Are there any genres, or genres that are, for the lack of a better word, more sellable than others?
Are we talking features, pilots, just in general?
Well, yeah, in general.
Well, on the feature side, I think just in general, just because of where we are in the world, consistently sort of a mandate or unofficial mandate from a lot of people, like they want hopeful, happy, cheerful. Makes sense. In the feature space right now, like action comedies are big. Recently sold one for a client. TV space, like mentioning cheerful, happy, hopeful, but also like a lot of the networks are looking for stories about new heroes, just because where we are right now, people, want those uplifting stories about people who are actually making a difference right now. And that I think people want those types of stories. But that's not to say that nobody wants, dark thrillers, dark comedies, or horror projects. Like people still want stuff like that right now. But yeah, like I said earlier, on the feature side, I think people are still buying just as much there. But I think TV is a little tricky right now. But I think that's just kind of where we're at right now in terms of genre. If that answers the question.
Okay. Thank you. So Ramesh, do you want to read our first log line from that?
Yeah, yes, this is from Jim Good. It's called Collusion. It's a TV pilot. When their son is kidnapped, a top political consultant and his journalist ex-wife are forced to use their leverage, spin, and tricks to do the bidding of the Russian government. Ozark meets House of Cards.
I think that was a pretty good log line, especially since using comps. Like I got a good sense of the genre for this. It is tricky because with Ozark, Breaking Bad, we've seen a lot of these. This feels familiar, and I feel like it's still sort of missing like the bigger hook for this. Like I got the sort of the political intrigue that would be behind House of Cards, the sort of dark grittiness also from Ozark, but like what is going to make this? What is the X factor for this? How is this going to be like? What I have to say is like I think it just needs to be tweaked a little bit more, just because like even though I have a good sense of what the series could be, it feels familiar, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I don't know if that was helpful.
Great. All right, Ramesh, you want to throw out another one?
Okay, this is from Gwen Menz Ogle. I hope I pronounced the surname correctly. It's called Research. It's a comedy pilot. A group of faculty struggle to make an impact at a prestigious university where egos, power, money, and motivational posters matter more than education. It's the comps are The Office and 30 Rock.
See, what I think was missing from that, characters. Like we don't know what the journey is, and it's not, again, like we don't need to know the full backstory of this, but like I got more from the comps than I did than the actual log line. Like I want to know what the journey is. What like I think where the one previously, what I did get a sense of like potentially who were the characters and what the journey could be. This one didn't quite get a sense. I got a sense of the sort of the workplaceness of it all, but not necessarily what is the engine for this. What is the what is this pilot about, and what's the series? So I felt like I got more from the comps than I actually did from the actual log line. So I would actually include a little bit more about the characters and their journey here.
Just on this, can I ask, when people query you or pitch you a log line for a TV series, do you want the log line for the pilot and the series?
No real preference. I mean, like, I would want to know the pilot because that's going to be what I'm going to read at the very least. But series logline, sure, that's helpful also.
Somebody had a question. I'm trying to scroll for it, and of course I can't find it. But the question was about twists. So if there's a twist in the story, should that be included in the logline?
You don't want to give it all away, obviously, but I think that you want to hint at it. You want to create an air of mystery. You don't want to put all your cards on the table. So definitely not. You want to create strong word of mouth. And, you know, worked with clients with really awesome stories where we already know that it's going to be the thing that people are going to talk about. So we don't want to be the ones to give that away when we're pitching it. And so we don't expect the clients, the writer, to do that either. You want it to feel that whomever is reading it, that they are discovering something, that they're the first ones to get in on this. You know, it's part of the fun of reading it and discovering what the twist is. And then it becomes like a holy shit word of mouth. Like I need to tell people about this. You know, so definitely not giving it away. But when you're you want to create that sort of air of mystery. You don't want to just say like, and there's a great twist at the end. Like you definitely don't want to do that. But you want to, like, obviously one of the greatest twists is in The Sixth Sense. But I mean, along the way there, the script was pretty solid as is. Like it was a pretty phenomenal story. And then when you got to the twist, then that took it to the next level. But you know, when you read a log line for that about a kid who can see dead people, like at the time that felt pretty cool and novel. But then I think you'd want to sort of tease a little bit. You want to hint that there could be something else beyond. And normally I can get a sense of that in the log line when I know like a twist would be coming. But yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Ramesh, you got one more?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comment. This doesn't have a name on it, but it's based on true events. In Bombay, India, after the disappearance of their young son, along with dozens of Indian boys, a British doctor and his National Geographic photographer wife tracked their whereabouts to Saudi Arabia. The kids kidnapped to serve as jockeys in high-stakes camel races. It's The Black Stallion meets Taken.
That's cool. I mean, like, leading off with based on a true story, you know, like that adds added weight, gravitas behind it. So that's great. Definitely including that in the log line. Comps were, got a good sense of it. What was it? Taken and Black Stallion?
Black Stallion meets Taken, yes.
Taken, yeah. Those seem so far apart from each other that I feel like Taken is definitely awesome to use as a comp because everyone just gets that. But when you add something like Black Stallion, it just feels so disparate from it. Like, what is that movie? So I would reconsider using Black Stallion. I feel like there could be another comp that involves from another film that involves horses. I don't know.
Hidalgo.
But hey, maybe. But I think that the log line is pretty solid. Got a good sense of the journey there. But like with Taken though, you know, like again, like really looking into comps, that when we think of Taken, it's the story of a father, you know, seeking revenge in a way, you know. And so what is the journey here? You know, like when we think of Taken, we think of like a really highly castable role for somebody like a Liam Neeson. So where's that in this project? I think those are the things to think about further.
Ramesh, do we have one more?
Oh, let me see.
I know, I'm sorry. I only said 3, but Matt is so concise. I'm usually so long-winded. I take 25 minutes to say what he says in
Here we go.
3 sentences.
By Elizabeth. It's a feminist by POC, which is what? Black, indigenous person
of color.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Actioner. A shy high school girl struggles to lead her misfit besties into battle against a sex slavery ring. It's Heathers meets Django Unchained.
Okay, this sounds like a lot of fun, for sure. Again, I think what's missing is I think with a lot of these too is the personal journey of these characters. Again, like you're only given so much time in your log line, but every story comes down to characters. Like I think sometimes with log lines or even just pitching, writers will often just present a situation or a particular place or scene, but forget to really focus on where are the characters in this? What's their journey? Sometimes it can get kind of lost into including all the set pieces that you think are going to be the marketable thing, but the real set piece is what is the character? What is the heart of this? What are you trying to share with this? It's even if it's not like, you know, an inspirational biopic based on a true story type thing, or if it's something involving, you know, a group of, you know, teen spies, whatever, you know, like whatever it is, like, I just want to know what is the heart of this story? What are you trying to say? If it's comedic, does it sound funny? Is it something I'm going to have fun watching? This sounds like a really fun project. I think, again, just similar to the other ones, what is the character's journey here?
And how? Oh.
No, I was just going to say glibly that I think there is a movie idea perhaps there's a studio executive who confuses a story about BIPOC with a biopic and hilarity ensues.
I never thought of that, but yeah.
I
How
have nothing better to do, you know. Go ahead, Ramesh.
how important is it to convey the tone of the piece in the log line? If it, you know, for you, if it's a dark thriller, that you get that in the log line, or if it's a comedy, that it's like you read this and you said it was a fun, it sounded fun to you.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, in terms of tone, I mean, it comes down to comps, it comes down to choice of words, the playfulness of it. Yeah, it's very important. Like, even with this one, it was only what, like a sentence or two. You're only given so much real estate if that's what you're going for in your log line. And so, like, you want to convey everything. If it's a horror project, scare us. You know, if it's a comedy, include maybe one or two zingers in there. Like, have it be funny. Absolutely, for sure, for tone.
Can we do this one only because I kind of like the title of it? So you see now, based on a title, I'm going to pick it. Maybe you won't like the title. I Love Your Hate. I kind of like that title. All right, so I'll read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a dramedy rom-com. Tone, Bridget Jones on her third husband meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The logline is an award-winning greeting card writer has 10 days to come up with a series of Your Love Is note cards or lose her job. But when she gets dumped for her husband's pedicurist, she can't write a love note to save her life. So she seeks help from the Lavender Room, an eclectic group of codependents, buries him alive and plants a, and I guess, well, this is the problem if your log line's too long.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that too, because there's a lot going on here. Like, I don't necessarily know. I kind of get a sense of what Bridget Jones on her third husband would be, but there's a lot of those little things in here, like the Lavender Room, an eclectic group of codependents. Like, what is that? Like, there's a lot going on. You definitely need to streamline and have it feel cleaner. But I only kind of get a sense of, like, I definitely get a sense of the tones here, and the playfulness of this. But yeah, I mean, Bridget Jones, I think you could probably just do Bridget Jones meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, especially if this is a dramedy. I kind of get a sense of using those projects. But yeah, I think it just needs to be trimmed, cleaner, and definitely needs the whatever's left at the end of that log line.
It's interesting. So I guess, Ramesh, that this forum perhaps only allots for a certain amount of words, which is actually good because it might really force writers to offer up a more streamlined log line. All right, so Ramesh, do you have a final question for Matt?
Let's see.
I love when I just love putting Ramesh on the spot.
Okay, this comes up too. How many scripts should writers have in their portfolios when they sort of query you, query a manager? Is it, you know, and also, should writers write TV specs?
Oh, well, so you mean specs?
Not original pilots, but specs of other shows.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just talk about that one.
Okay.
I mean, it's not something that, like, say, I would necessarily read unless it was sort of like a stunt sample. Like, yeah, I think a lot of people on here might remember the Seinfeld 9/11 spec that was pretty hot a few years ago. We actually even have a client who wrote a How I Met Your Mother spec, but in considering the Me Too movement. And so it just really depends, honestly. But, like, for the most part, no. Like, it matters mostly, almost entirely, for the network fellowship programs, because they have their list of shows that you would need to have a spec for to submit for those. But for a rep, not so much really, unless, like, it's one of those really rare sort of stunt things. But I mean, I just in the past year and a half or so, I've probably maybe read, definitely at least one. But it's not, I wouldn't sign a writer off of that. I probably only read it because it was part of like a whole thing of materials that they sent, like 2 or 3 samples. And in terms of the number of scripts that should be in your portfolio, there's no sort of like a set number in mind, because again, like it comes down to, if it's only one, it's got to be the most undeniable piece of material. But I would say like a good good target to have is 2 features, 2 pilots, 4 pieces of material, because I think that's what we usually try to strive for each year with our clients. It's really tough to do that. We do strive for that, not successfully all the time, because it really just depends on the client, their availability, if they're staff, obviously they're going to be unavailable to do too much. But if it's like, say, a newer writer, we're aiming for like 2 or 3 at the very least, at least 2 in terms of development. But when you're hitting up a rep, we always want to know that you can generate. So the more the better, but I don't want to know that like, oh, I've written 20 scripts in the last 2 years. Okay, so like, is it a matter of quantity versus quality? It's always going to be about quality. But I would say like 2 features, 2 pilots is generally what I kind of like to have. But I find writers who've only had features and have only had pilots, so it's just, yeah, doesn't necessarily matter fully.
And should writers be open to working in both TV and features?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I think it just increases their chances. But I think I also respect a writer who knows where they are right now in terms of their craft. Like I said, like I have a few clients who have written only pilots, and for whatever reason, a lot of them are scared to tackle a feature. And for all of them, we're working on a feature together, but we have a hell of a lot more to work with on the TV side of things. But they've also seen that they've only been limited to one arena, and that as we're going out on our own meetings and getting the needs of network execs, producers, and what people are looking for, then we come back and say, well, I could have put you up for that feature project, but we don't have a feature. So like, you know what I mean? Like, or that I would submit their pilot and like, so for them for this, and it's pretty rare that you can book a job just off of a pilot when it's for a feature. But if they don't have a feature, we can't have that conversation. So.
And one last question, if I bug him, do you have any opinion on projects where you have co-writers or projects that are co-written?
Oh, do you mean like what's that process like with co-writers?
Right. Yeah. Do you work with co-writers or?
Like writing
right now,
teams, for example, yeah.
Writing teams, yes.
Yeah, right now I don't personally, but I mean, obviously, like if you look at the whole lit roster, we have writing teams who and I have met with writing teams as well, but just haven't signed any yet. And so, but I mean, like I've helped with other clients at Lit who are also part of writing teams as well. So it's just like understanding the dynamic of like who contributes what's their process, all of that stuff. And also like I'll have clients who will decide that they're going to collaborate with another writer who maybe repped somewhere else. And so that's another conversation that we have with them, that like, well, we're working on this for you. Like we're developing your career as a solo writer. We're not having this conversation of you moving forward as a writing team with somebody else who's repped somewhere else, because that makes it that muddies things quite a bit, because now I'm having to coordinate with the other rep on a project. And it makes it pretty complicated. Not really, but more so than I would like. So I would definitely prefer to have that conversation that we are going to work together, have you two work as a team, but then also understanding fully on before even signing that do you guys have solo projects? So we have to figure out like, does that mean that I'm going to have to work with you independently from the other person, and are you going to be okay with that? And it's just like, because they're so plugged in that it's like, all right, if I don't get back to that one person about this particular thing timely, and I take a long time to get back to the other person, then I can kind of, the sort of the other things that you don't necessarily think about when you collaborate with another person,
Wow. Yeah. Okay. There's all sorts of strings attached to that. So that's good to know. So Matt, as we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't ask you, anything that you think we should know, or any parting words of wisdom from you?
Oh boy. I mean, for me, I think just the best piece of advice, and I always like to bring things back to what I learned from the Austin Film Festival, because I mean, it brought me here to management and working with writers, and I think that's the perspective that I bring here in sort of my unconventional journey to being a literary manager. But the thing that I saw, like, it always comes down to resiliency and not really giving up, because the reason why I decided to be a manager is that I wanted to be able to do something for the writers that I believed in, actually be the person who could make something happen for them. And, like, there's a writer who I worked with who in in 2010, he won AFF, and now I'm actually working with him. And that was one hallmark for him in his career as a writer. And 10 years later, now we're, talking about a project that feature project that we're selling for him. And so, not to say that it takes 10 years for that, because he's done quite a bit since then. But it's resiliency, generating, not giving up. Like, you just have to constantly write. I mean, it's something that sounds so rudimentary and sounds kind of silly to have to even bring up, but you just have to keep writing. But you also have to know who you are as a storyteller, your voice, and be able to communicate that. And that's what I respond to, and I think that's what a lot of other people respond to. And I don't know, for words of wisdom is that, what I've realized, and what I've, even when I was at AFF, is that competitions only get you so far, because, that's part of the conversation here, is that just because you do well in a competition fellowship program, it's definitely a platform for you, for sure, but it's a matter of what you do with it. And so, just, like, there's no such thing as, like, you're given a silver platter, like, here you go, you won, your career is now set. Like, it really matters what you do after that. You got to constantly generate. That's why, like, when we sort of talked about what writers do well, from the competition scene, it's the ones that don't give up, that are constantly generating, and yeah, I don't know.
No, that was great. Ramesh thanks you. I thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our group members, thank you. Everybody's chiming in right now. Thank you. Great answers, Matt. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Matt. That was great. Very informative. Thanks so much, Matt. Over and over again. Maybe on Tuesday, you might have a few more queries. I don't know. But
I welcome them. Bring them on. That's totally fine.
Well, we really appreciate that. And it's nice to know that there is a manager like you out there that is so supportive of new writers and new writing, and has been so supportive all these years. So again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good seeing you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
So long, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.